Evidence for Giants with Matt Shy, Part 2. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10x10x10 Tangent Cube of Science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau, and this is definitely the very first time we have tried to do this. It's totally the first take. This is not take two. Zero mistakes, like Kyle said.
Good to see you guys. I'm just now seeing you guys for the first time.
So we are joined again by Professor Shy. We're going to be continuing the exploration into the evidence for giants, this research that he's been doing. This time he's not in studio, as you can see. He is in his home base in parts unknown.
That's right.
Yeah.
In Alaska, yeah. Oh, wait. Just doxed myself.
In Alaska. Welcome back, buddy. Glad to have you here. Yeah.
We're also joined by the Watcher.
Yeah.
He's lurking out there in outer space, listening in on the conversation with Sophons.
With Sophons, yes.
What's going on, buddy? Where are you at?
Well, I'm glad to be here. Hopefully, this is a little sooner than pre-show. We're not doing this again.
You can definitely tell if Sophons don't want him to listen.
Super excited. I don't care if we have to do this 9 times. I'm willing to be here for this episode. This is good stuff.
Great.
Yeah, so I say we dive right into it because we definitely haven't seen any of these slides yet. And I'm pumped to see them.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, let me share my screen. We'll just get right to it.
Yeah.
And totally, you guys are going to be mind blown on slide 1. Let me Yeah, so okay. From the great first episode, I got a summary of what's going on for part 2, and then I'll go over kind of just the notes from part 1 that we need to remember. So what I'm getting into first today is the source writings of the Lovelock giants, looking at all of the artifacts of Lovelock that are available to us. I did some research on DNA, which validated to have traced Lovelock remains to Central Asian bronze culture, as well as a separate line of the Paleo Indians. I have a hypothesis that people came on coastal boats from the Beringian land bridge due to the rapid explosion of peoples in both the North and South America, possibly now 37,000 years ago. We have mummies found in the Southwest, including Spirit Cave and Lovelock, resembling Central Asian African methods of mummification. And the question I pose is, are the oral stories of the natives about Lovelock Cave of how foreigners came on boats that were cannibals, that had copper, did not speak their language, who had 50% larger teeth, are these stories true? So
all right,
that's what we're getting into. Hopefully we can get it all in today. Beep.
Fantastic.
So just things to remember from part 1, we're looking at 7 to 8 foot humans that did not have gigantism. There's only 2,800 people over 7 feet tall in the world today. An update I have is there's only about 3 living people that are 8 foot tall and 14 ever verified measured in all of our written history, which is pretty wild.
Wow.
Museums and our favorite Smithso Where Did It Go Again Institute frequently loses, destroys, or sells artifacts of importance. All these things are true here. We postulated that there could be up to hundreds of millions of remains in the mounds peoples. That oral tradition has been proven in some cases to be superior to written in terms of accuracy over thousands of years. And then things I'm personally looking for are firsthand accounts, reed boats, copper, double teeth, and lack of deformity in over 7 feet or lack of gigantism. And then please join along in playing the drinking game in which you take a drink when I say compelling. Credit to Casey. Because I guess in part one I said compelling, I don't know, 1,000 times, and she had to go to the hospital. So I compel you to play the compelling drinking game. I think it will be compelling.
You're off to a good start.
All right, good. Oh man, I can't believe I say compelling that many times. I got to watch out how many times I say compelling. Jeez. So I thank you, Troy, for the he helped me out a little bit because I wanted to kind of get an image of what an 8.5 foot tall person without agrameli would look like. And if you just take a look at that for a minute, I mean, he's towering over Andre, and then it's even a man of 6 feet, which is pretty tall for today. I mean, for people listening, the 6 foot man, goes to his abs. So, I mean, on top of the fact his head is twice as big, his arms are as big as his biceps are bigger than the man's thighs. I mean, so
that's great.
Just to kind of get the scale right. I mean, 8.5 feet tall without gigantism would be terrifying in an army situation. So we don't have to go exaggerating and stretching the truth, saying 20 feet, 15 feet tall. I would probably pass out if I saw a giant 15 feet tall.
And I can imagine, seeing this image. And by the way, I want to say, Troy, people were asking about the last episode and previous ones about the artwork. Troy has been doing our episode art, and he's amazing. So yeah, thanks goes to Troy for sure. He's been doing some really good work for our episode art.
He's a fantastic artist, for sure.
He is. So yeah, you can see this, and you can imagine if you're in a battlefield situation, you see a dude like that, you might think he's 15 feet tall.
Right.
You see something like that running at you in the heat of battle, you're like, bro, that was giant. He had to be 15 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to sit there and be like, excuse me, sir, can you stand next to me so I can measure you in comparison? You're going to see him in the distance and be like, oh, and you're going to run like a baby.
Yeah.
Or a toddler. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cool. So anyway, I just wanted to get that, so we get that in our head, that's kind of what we're looking at here. I do have some corrections. Sorry. Robert Wadlow. I don't know why I put an L there. People were very upset. There's a lot of upset people. But the number one most upset people was Andre the Giant. I'm super sorry, everybody, that I said for sure he took steroids. Okay? I've read that he did. Okay? And so this is the thing, trying to sift through the evidence. So he claims he took no steroids, but Vince McMahon was sued. And part of the lawsuit was he was forcing all wrestlers to take performance-enhancing drugs. So we'll believe Andre, though, so that everyone get off my back, okay? So that was like the number one comment, like, oh, you're a terrible human for saying that Andre took steroids. So, okay, I'm dropping it. Another thing that I wanted to clarify was the fireworks during the North Carolina encounter. The English did have fireworks in the 1500s, but the English weren't trading this knowledge with the Spanish. And the first time the Spanish received them was from the Moors in like 1590. And you can look it up right on Spain's website, just because a couple people were saying that the Europeans had fireworks, yes, but they did not share them with the Spaniards. And at the time that they encountered Datha, they had not seen fireworks. FYI.
Okay. All right.
And then Kyle was asking why we were talking about there's not a lot of finds from the Clovis people or the Mound people, right? So I actually have some. I have some evidence on that, which we'll get to in a minute.
What do you mean? Well, I don't even recall this. What finds? Finds of what?
I'll just show you in a minute. This is way more important. I found a picture of Porn Chai. Okay. Oh, yeah. So I know everyone will be super excited because, that we found a picture of Porn Chai.
I did see somebody claimed that they searched it and had no problems. There were There was no disgusting
Listen,
images.
he
It was
said-
completely.
the algorithm that Matt
No.
just knows.
He said, I even turned safe search off.
Yeah,
Come on, bro.
I know. I don't believe him either.
He was trolling.
Yeah.
He was totally trolling.
He's trying to get people
He's
to
just-
search it.
Yeah. Don't listen to that guy, people. Okay. So, Kyle, just real quick, I went and did some research on why there's actually not a lot of remains for potentially up to 40,000 years of America, because we have such acidic soil, frequent flooding, and the decomposition process because of the microbes in North America. This is why we actually don't have a lot of remains. And I don't know if you guys know this, but for the Clovis people, there was only one complete skeletal find of the young boy. I mean, that was it. So we're basing a whole peoples off of one skeletal remain and a ton of Clovis points, obviously. But when in terms of people remains,
Yeah,
just one.
that skeleton isn't even. We're not even sure if it's Clovis.
Are you talking about Anzac 1?
Anzac? Yeah,
Yes,
I thought it was a girl.
yeah.
I'm sorry, young child. I didn't dig into it because I was like, okay, I have more on that. So
We've talked about it a lot on
Yeah.
the show, so
yeah, so we don't need to dig into it. But like I said, there's only one complete skeletal remains. For the Denisovan, there's only about 7 bones, and including teeth. So we're basing another whole group of people off of 7 bones in a DNA sample. Well, guess what? We have more skeletal remains of people over 8 feet tall than these 2 whole groups of people. So why are we dismissing that there was 8-foot people without gigantism when we have more remains than these whole groups of people we base entire theories and school from?
that's a good point.
That is a great point.
I mean, one argument would be that the prevalence of the artifacts, because really Clovis is an artifact
yeah,
group.
it's a lithic type.
Yeah. But
Fine.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
I just
But I think also part of it is the current academia is not actually trying to pursue is the other issue, right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
But in terms of skeletal remains, this actually got me more excited because, like I said, we have more skeletal remains of large people. So,
That's cool.
and then we even have more fossil evidence of people 10 feet tall, which is part of the Lovelock Cave dig. And so, this is compelling to me that we have, a 10-foot tall skeleton, which we'll go over.
Watcher is saying Anzac 1 is a Paleo-Indian male infant.
Oh.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it wrong.
Thanks, Watcher.
Dudes, we have the biggest find ever.
I misgendered him.
Wait, before we get into this. Okay, 9-foot skeleton out of Fort Worth. Okay.
Hey, I
just
remember
wanted
that.
to
Super verified.
Yeah, I remember that.
Super verified. So, okay,
That's a pretty sweet
this is
stash,
a joke
bro.
for audio listeners. This is clearly Russ and Kyle with a fake skeleton. And Troy made this, and he was like, "Can you put this in?" I'm like, "Sure, bro. You can have it." Okay. All right, back to serious biz, but I'm glad you enjoyed that.
That's a nice stash, bro. Look at that.
Look at those mustaches.
I gotta work on that.
Woo!
It, like,
Yeah,
Just-
got nice points on the end. Yeah.
look at those chaps. Oh, dang.
Yeah.
Yeah, dang.
They got old sheep chaps.
Yeah, dude. Killer.
I see I have
Excellent.
a repeating rifle. Hell yeah. That's a good one.
He did a good job.
Yeah.
All right. So now we can actually start the Lovelock story. So I did some research, and there's tons of stories about, the red-headed giants of Lovelock, and I wanted to get to the source and see actually what is all this mythology and claims coming from, because a lot of people don't cite the source. So it doesn't take a lot of digging to find this, but here's there's two accounts from the Paiutes Indians, and the first one's from Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, and this is the first story that claims that there was a different group of people that ended up hanging out by Lovelock Cave. So anyway, Russ, are you able to read? Do you want to read this out loud? You have such a great voice.
Yeah, I can read this. Yeah.
Great.
Among the traditions of our people is one of a small tribe of barbarians who used to live along the Humboldt River. It was many hundreds of years ago. They used to waylay my people and kill and eat them. They would dig large holes in our trails at night, and if any of our people traveled at night, which they did, for they were afraid of these barbarous people, they would oftentimes fall into these holes. That tribe would even eat their own dead. Yes, they would even come and dig up our dead after they were buried and would carry them off and eat them. Now and then they would come and make war on my people. They would fight, and as fast as they killed one another on either side, the women would carry off those who were killed. My people say they were very brave. When they were fighting, they would jump up in the air after the arrows that went over their heads and shoot the same arrows back again. My people took some of them into their families, but could not make them like themselves. So at last, they made war on them. This war lasted a long time. Their number was about 2,600. The war lasted some 3 years. My people killed them in great numbers, and what few were left went into the thick bush, and my people set the bush on fire. This was right above Humboldt Lake. Then they went to work and made Thule boats and went into Humboldt Lake. They could not live there very long without fire. They were nearly starving. My people were watching them all around the lake and would kill them as fast as they would come on land. At last, one night, they all landed on the east side of the lake and went into a cave near the mountains. It was a most horrible place, for my people watched at the mouth of the cave and would kill them as they came out to get water. My
Part
people,
two.
continued. My people would ask them if they would be like us and not eat people like coyotes or beasts. They talked the same language, but they would not give up. At last, my people were tired, and they went to work and gathered wood and began to fill up the mouth of the cave. Then the poor fools began to pull the wood inside till the cave was full. At last, my people set it on fire. At the same time, they cried out to them, "Will you give up and be like men and not eat people like beasts? Say quick, and we will put out the fire." But no answer came from them. My people said they thought the cave must be very deep or far into the mountain. They had never seen the cave nor known it was there until then. They called out to them as loud as they could, "Will you give up? Say so, or you will all die." But no answer came. Then they all left the place. In 10 days, some went back to see if the fire had gone out. They went back to my 3rd or 5th great-grandfather and told him they must all be dead. There was such a horrible smell. This tribe was called People Eaters, and after my people had killed them all, the people around us called us Sedukara, or Setika. It means conqueror. It also means enemy. I do not know how we came by the name of Paiutes. It is not an Indian word. I think it is misinterpreted. Sometimes we are called pine nut eaters, for we are the only tribe that lives in the country where pine nuts grow. My people say that the tribe we exterminated had reddish hair. I have some of their hair, which has been handed down from father to son. I have a dress, which has been in our family a great many years, trimmed with this reddish hair. I am going to wear it sometime when I lecture. It is called the mourning dress, and no one has such a dress but my family.
Thank you, Russ. Wow. So that's the first published story of the red-headed cannibals, right? She mentions nothing about them being giant.
Yeah.
So now that's interesting. However, if we go into her brother's story, which was told 3 years before, and we don't have to read this whole story, I will, because it's very similar. But basically, he starts off, this is the brother of Sarah, Natchez. So basically, he states something very similar. A long time ago, an Indian tribe came into this country from the southward. This Indian tribe was redheaded, and they were very tall. Okay, and so he also continues. He said they crossed the lake and that they used the use of Thule boats to cross the lake easily. So here's a confirmation, and then also he was saying that they're very tall. So here's the origination of the Lovelock Cave: giants, cannibals, and the redheads. Okay.
It's interesting too. This I had not heard the part about the lake that they fought a war with him. It lasted 3 days, and then what was left, they fled out into the lake, and then her people surrounded the lake and just basically trapped them out there in the water. Anytime they got close to the shore, they would kill them or shoot at them with arrows and stuff. So they were just stuck out there in the water, starving. I hadn't heard that part. And then they went.
So that's the first story. And then go ahead. What?
Well, and then they went and found this cave that the natives said that they didn't know was there. That's really interesting as well.
Yeah. So if we look at the lake, here is the lake. It's an interesting lake because there's no water in the lake.
Yeah.
And the Lovelock Cave is several miles away. So then I had to go down the rabbit hole of, when was this lake filled with water? So I will tell you, it was 9,000 years ago.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah. And the part of the greater Lake Lahontan. Now the Humboldt Lake is a playa of the Lake Lahontan. But there, here's basically what it looked like during the 9,000 years ago, the Pleistocene phase of the lake. I wanted to point this out that there's we have the Columbia River and the Sacramento River. I mean, the Sacramento River is pretty close. I actually reached out to Randall, but it was like yesterday, so I haven't got a reply back. But I was wondering if he could assume theoretically that the Sacramento River could actually connect into Lake Lahontan, because there, some of the stories say that they actually came from the west, on boats. There is a valley between the Sacramento River and Lake Lahontan, but I am not, I'm not educated enough to tell you whether or not definitely the water could have, connected. Something to think about, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a huge lake. Okay, so the Tule boats on the lake is no longer there. We went over, the lake had largely disappeared in its extended form by about 9,000 years ago. The use of Tule reeds and duck decoys would have made sense in a lake area. But according to the Smithsonian, the duck decoys were from 400 BC to 100 AD in a place where the lake had receded 9,000 years ago. Again, who do we believe, the oral history or the Smithsonian?
Oh, man, that's crazy. That's amazing.
So then here's the decoys. Dated in the cave, dated 100 AD.
Yeah.
How much sense does it make to have your decoys several miles away from the closest part of the water? Also, the lake at 9,000 years ago potentially couldn't even have been deep enough for the Tule boats. It could be 10, 11, or 10,000 years ago, whatever the case is. But for sure, how are they taking boats, hanging out on the boats, and then hiding in the cave if they would have to traverse, a few miles back and forth to get water?
Yeah.
So her oral stories is incredible, because if it's true, this story is much older.
Yeah. Like long enough ago to where the lake was close to the entrance of the cave is what you're saying, right? The edge of the lake. Yeah.
I mean, there had to be Tule there, what reeds, right?
Yeah.
There's no Tule there. You have to go up the river, right? So the river fed the lake. And then again, there's no ducks landing on this dry lake right now. You have to go way back. So there's a lot of evidence there that shows that this story is valid, for one, because we have the decoys and the stories, and then the lake was there.
Why would they? How would they get this date of 100 AD with organic material for duck decoys? Right, those are made from organic material, aren't they? Like reed parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
And
actual
it looks like feathers.
Yeah.
there's feathers, yeah, which are pretty incredible that they were preserved.
But I
And-
mean, look, the cave was there all the way up until the present. So it doesn't mean that the story has to be 100 AD.
Yeah.
Or
it
that
could-
the ducks have to be 9,000 years ago. The ducks could be more recent.
yeah,
duck
it's,
decoys.
it's possible that, especially if her people had carried this story for so long, that they went to the cave to remember it, and maybe they left the decoys way later. I wonder if that's possible.
True. Yeah. And all, the cave was, by the way, when she told the story, the cave entrance had been collapsed. So for some unknown amount of time, and she did not bring the people, to the cave.
Yeah.
So the cave was discovered later.
Mm.
But they had discussed the cave. No one could get in the cave. But eventually what had happened is someone was exploring, opened the cave later, found bat guano, and then they found a few artifacts. No one was interested in the University of California wasn't interested in the beginning in doing an archaeological dig. There was a ton of bat guano, so they sold it off to make saltpeter.
Yeah.
And then a couple feet of bat guano was removed, and thousands of artifacts were just destroyed or thrown away because the people that were doing the bat guano did not care about the artifacts. And then eventually they hit something that was interesting enough to where they were like, hey, we're throwing away thousands of artifacts, and now we found whatever. There's not a lot of details on that, but eventually 3 years later, they were like, hey, we can't, there's not enough bat guano. There's tons of artifacts. And then University of California comes back in.
Yeah. God.
Yeah. So they destroyed like probably 90% of the artifacts that were in there first.
But it's likely that, again, this cave was occupied throughout the entire 9,000 year period. So that the artifacts on the surface underneath this bat guano were much more recent. I'm not saying it's great that they threw them away or anything. I mean, obviously that sucks.
Yeah.
And they probably didn't throw them away. They probably somebody was taking them home.
Sure.
But,
I think they described that they just threw a bunch out, but they also, anything that was intact and interesting, they were keeping and then selling black market and stuff.
Yeah, of course. So my point is that they're digging down in this area, and they're going to be finding the most recent artifacts first.
Mm-hmm.
And as they go deeper, then they run out of bat guano. Then you're going to have if the new excavators come in and start excavating, they're just going to keep getting older and older as it goes down.
Yeah.
Totally. So that's part of the interesting part of the story.
Yeah, that's cool.
They also found cannibal poop, which is neat. So the coprolites, fossilized feces, they were gathered, and they found animal, but they also found human hair. Now, suggesting, I guess there was enough human hair. I mean, people ingest their hair every now and then, so I'm not saying this is definitive. There's even people that enjoy eating their own hair, I think, so. But hair in the feces, I mean, maybe there was a lot. There wasn't a detailed write-up of the cannibal poop.
Okay.
Wow.
So then we have finally University of California comes in, the mummified remains of the two red-haired people. One was a female at 6.5 feet tall, and the other male over 8 feet tall. Yeah. So this is University of California writing and documenting that they have an 8-foot tall skeletal remains with red hair. So that's pretty tall.
Yes. That is very tall. But only two people? Okay, you're going to keep going here.
Yeah, so that was the first find. So then they did an extensive archaeological dig. And then this is February and then June of 1931. This was written in the Nevada Review. Two very large skeletons were found in the Humboldt dry lake bed near Lovelock. So this is not in the cave, but in the dry lake bed. One of the skeletons measured 8.5 feet and was later described as having been wrapped in a gum-covered fabric similar to Egyptian mummies. And the other was nearly 10 feet, so 9 foot 7 inches tall.
Man.
Yeah, so Lovelock is definitely interesting with the amount of finds. By the way, so just so for skeptical people, I could not find this confirmed with California, but there was a ton of excavation with the University of California. But this seemed very plausible because of the ongoing excavation. And then here's at the one of the museums about Lovelock, the Lovelock shoes. However, two subsequent excavations that were carried out in 1912 and 1924 brought to light thousands of ancient artifacts, among them a well-worn sandal measuring an astonishing 15 inches of length, which is the equivalent of a modern-day 29 shoe.
Damn.
So, and then I have, for comparison, Shaq, who stands 7'1", as we know, only wears a size 22. He's a tiny man. So,
Wow.
and that's pretty cool.
15 inches. Jesus.
That's a big foot,
Yeah.
pun intended. And I will tell you that this museum, I mean, totally makes the assumption that it's Bigfoot. I mean, come on, guy. This
Right.
is not, this is a human.
Hey, a red-headed giant, bro. Come on, that's Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Bigfoot.
Yeah.
No matter
I
what
do
you
gotta put
no
down-
matter what you think, that is a Bigfoot.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to tell you, the stories of the red-headed giants, they're all jerks. I mean,
Yeah.
they're the cannibal, like nasty people. If you get like some brown or black-haired giants, they're like much nicer people. They try and get along, but those red-haired giants, they're just they're not cool. So,
Well,
it's always the redhead.
it's break time. You got a
right.
good stopping point here.
Yeah, I mean, I have, this is a perfect stopping point. We have more remains to go through on the Lovelock. So,
Excellent.
Yeah, we can pause.
All right, we will be right back, folks.
All right.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast with Matt Shy. And I dropped my phone. Giants, part 2. Giant sandals
guys.
from near Lovelock. That's really cool.
Yeah. What was it?
Pretty
20?
wild.
29 size sandal.
29, 15-inch.
29
foot.
size paleo cruisers.
Paleo cruiser.
Wow, that's a great word for those. Yeah. And there's a ton more, dude. Like, this is actually, I would say, and I've seen other people say, it's one of the biggest archaeological finds in North America, and it has kind of been dismissed, right? So, but I got a whole lot more
All
I
right.
want to share.
Yeah, let's
get to it.
Let's look at it.
Well, let's do it. There we go. All right. This is where we left off. Let's move along to the next piece, which is pretty cool. So these skulls are no longer available, but they were originally in the Humboldt Museum in Winnemucca, Nevada. So Don Monroe, he's an amateur archaeologist. He's controversial, okay? But him and another gentleman did gain access to the Humboldt Museum, and I think that these are valid photos. And they have a few more, and there's actually one skull that's still being shown at the Humboldt Museum, I believe. Now, it's hard to tell the scale of these skeletons, but the one, if you go from left to right, I think it shouldn't be mirrored. So on the left, there's no jawbone, right?
Yep.
Okay, so then second from the left, this one's skull is pretty large, and the back has been restored. And then they're all quite large, and we're going to see how large they are. But they didn't put a regular size skull, together. These are all full skulls from the cave. Let me go next. So this is another set. These are from the 70s, by the way. So this is why we have black and white and color photos.
Okay.
But here's the same set. And then we do have, as this was labeled by MKD, and we'll get into who that is. But these guys have teamed together to kind of piece the Lovelock mysteries together. This extraordinary jawbone is huge. So here's some evidence. All of these have been repatriated. And then here's just a single shot image. And then MK Davis, he stitched it and verified that he tried to stitch these photos together because of whatever he wanted, a high resolution photo from his, whatever 35 millimeter.
Yeah.
So these are just the photos to verify that they were real. Now, here's kind of blew my mind, and I just want to say I don't know if this is 100% verified. I believe it's legitimate, compelling evidence. This photo, which this was written down by one of the employees of the museum in the 70s before when they took these photos. So here's the skull evidence. The skull measurements say 20 inches. And there's no definition as to what the museum was using for the 20-inch measurement. So I did some research on what standard skull measurements, and I went with breadth.
Yeah.
Because if I went with skull height, this thing would be absolutely massive if we went with skull height. So I figured breadth is the most common measurement. Even still, the 99th percentile male currently is only 16.5. So it's an entire.
Yes. Measure around the skull.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So for the audio listeners, it goes above and behind the ears. Okay. So you wrap a measuring tape, and the average male who still has their skin and flesh is 16.5.
So you above and behind the ears, and you wrap measuring tape all the way around the skull. That's the measurement you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because I thought you said width. I was like, no way.
Breadth.
Yeah.
Okay. Breadth, I believe. Okay. And so this was a questionable measurement. So I went with like the most reasonable measurement of, which would be something around 20%. Larger still is massive. But what kind of was really shocking to me, if this is some real measurements, is the EAM, which is the external acoustic meatus. This measurement from ear to ear, this is the inner ear to inner ear.
Okay.
like the ear bone here.
Yeah.
So this says 12 inches, right? Was their measurement.
God.
So you go 12 inches, we're talking, a whole ruler.
Yeah, a
This
foot
is-
wide.
This is a massive skull. Okay. So
So the watcher is saying the lower jawbones are exceptionally squared. If anyone does an image search on Google for a human lower jawbone, they will see that the lower jaws for regular humans do not look the same as these. And I noticed that too when you were showing the picture that the bone down there where the chin is it's very deep and is very
Yeah.
It has an enormous depth. And then he also says the place that it's standardly measured is the point at which the jawbone attaches to the skull, which is like what you're talking about right by the ear. Yeah.
yeah, right under the EAM.
Yeah.
So you go to your skull right here, right under your under ear.
Yeah.
Yes. So an average man's is just 6 inches. So this would be double the width. And I went conservative on the height because we don't have that. Sorry, I don't have that measurement, right?
Yeah.
But if it would be double on the width, I don't want to assume anything,
Yeah.
but be double the height. So let's just go with the measurement that's actually easy to see, the EAM. That's a very clearly defined measurement of 1 foot. Insane.
Yeah.
And then the mandible is 8 1/4 inches. And the average man's mandible width, we don't have a width or height on this.
Yeah, it doesn't say.
It's written down, right?
Yeah.
So if it's going by the width of a mandible, then this would be, would be almost double. Well, good 60% increase in mandible size. Even if it's the mandible length, this would be, 1 1/4 inches longer, on top of the fact having much more depth.
Wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, this image kind of struck me, and I drew the little drawing because, I kind of wanted to get a feel. So I did basically almost double on the EAM, and then I kind of eyeballed, and it turned out to make the skull kind of like a perfect circle, which I don't think would be accurate. I think it actually would be taller in ratio, but we don't have that measurement.
Right.
Anyway, that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. So you said that what was this guy's name? The one that took the pictures?
Don Monroe.
So why is he controversial? Is he controversial because he's looking at stuff like this?
He's an amateur archaeologist.
So he is also a Bigfoot advocate. While he doesn't say that these guys were Bigfoot, he's also like, he's into not just archaeology, right? So he's into some kind of fourth dimension Bigfoot stuff. So I just wanted to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
MK Davis is also into Bigfoot, which is fine. I'm not knocking it, but I'm trying to go from this perspective, I'm trying to go with like hard evidence and facts to establish. I'm not trying to go down the mythical aspects. So I think these are incredible.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to be as reasonable and skeptic as possible while still saying, holy cow. I mean, these are huge skulls, right? So here's the solid evidence, right? Massive skulls with the museum, and they were repatriated back to the Paiute tribe, which is great and fine. I wish they would have pulled DNA from these particular samples. These are not the samples that they pulled DNA. However, these were verified that they did exist in the museum. So this is what pulled these up. So these guys took the pictures. What hasn't been verified by the museum or the University of California are these measurements. So these measurements were written down per the request of Monroe from a worker of the museum because they were repatriating them. So I wanted to give a disclaimer saying that the museum probably was ticked off that these were written down.
Right.
You know. Oh.
And basically these guys are looking for fossil evidence of Bigfoot. Is that's the implication?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's
they're
interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that angle for looking for Bigfoot.
Yeah. So they're like, hey, we're looking for Bigfoot. And they're like, holy cow, look at these skulls. These are huge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
But they're human skulls. They're
cool.
not. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
I mean, I don't know. They could be Bigfoot, but I'm not going down the Bigfoot.
Yeah. I guess I've
road
never seen a
today.
Bigfoot. I can't say that they're not Bigfoot skulls either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, according to the Paiutes and the museum, even without DNA evidence, they were Paiute tribe.
Yeah.
And gave them back to the Paiutes, and these have been buried in an undisclosed location in Nevada. And I think that for the most part, this is accurate. I do think, and we're going to actually see this later, is that they have repatriated people that weren't a part of the tribe.
Mm.
And these could be some of them,
Yeah.
because there's significant DNA evidence that these people were not a part of the tribe.
Which the
There's a
Paiutes' own myths
name.
say that at least at some point they fought some people that died in that cave that were not part of their tribe, right?
So for sure, in this presentation, even the Paiutes say that these people were not a part of their tribe, but these bones were repatriated anyways.
Yeah.
So anyway, concluding on this, mega big skull.
Yeah.
This is just modern mandible size. I did the research on NIH for anyone questioning my numbers. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, here's some more stuff from Monroe. Now, this is incredible looking. Okay. Handprint was an 18-inch handprint, was the same tar of rendered fat and ash that were also in the Lovelock Cave. It was washed away in late 2013. So now Monroe and MK Davis were the ones. So they went on an expedition and said that they found this and documented it, and it was then washed away. So there was no scientific research done on this supposed handprint. However, it definitely looks like a handprint, and it's 18 inches.
What is it in? The print is in what, stone?
It's on this. It's near the ceiling on the wall of some of the inner cave, as they did. They were poking around in the cave. There's multiple caverns in the cave. It's actually, the cave is a horseshoe shape, and then there's also some diversions.
Okay.
And I didn't tell you guys that the cave was originally dug out from the much larger lake at some point, potentially much longer. So there was water there that actually built this cave. So anyway, they did an expedition, and here's a handprint. There's not a whole lot on this, but it's a part of the puzzle pieces of Lovelock. Whether or not this was totally legit, we'll never know. But it looks incredible. There's no scientific backing of it.
Okay.
I personally don't see the handprint. I mean, I see a couple of long aspects that could look like a middle finger.
Right.
Maybe
Sure.
the guy was...
Well, and also you can look up maybe because we're doing a Zoom, I don't know, but I see a thumb, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a dark spot in the pattern somewhat of a hand.
Yeah.
But it does.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not giving it credibility. I just wanted to point out that's a part of the puzzle.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing this out also. Just like,
Yeah,
it's
good.
not. Yeah.
Moving along. So now I want to tell you this first jawbone on the left people have been using it as an optical illusion to blow people's minds. They'll immediately go, wow, look how much bigger that jawbone is. This is not true. This is just what happened is Monroe went and got his teeth in a cast and then compared it to the jawbone that was in the museum.
But if you move that top image down, I mean, the teeth probably would line up fairly well.
Exactly, right? So this is, if you just look at it like this, some people will say, wow, look how much bigger. That's not the point I'm trying to make. I actually want to debunk the fact that this is not the whole jawbone. This is very easy to see if you just take a second. But on the right is, an average man's actual jawbone. And you can see that, there's a 20% increase in size on this jawbone, which is probably what are the measurements that we were looking at, which is the jawbone length of 20%.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, there's, some actual rendering of a regular jawbone versus one of the Lovelock people's jawbone.
Yeah.
Or giant.
Yeah. It's, you can see that like all of the bones are much larger, right? They're more massive or whatever, but it isn't, you're right. It's not that it doesn't give the same impression as that cast compared to the jawbone.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the other striking thing, though, is that some of the teeth are up to 50% larger. So that's, in mass, right? So you have some serious
molars back there.
Teeth. and the front teeth are much longer, which you can't see here, but they're also significantly bigger in length. This is just that you have already established this with your listeners, but this is just validation that Clovis is no longer the first, and that Paleo-Indian people probably went back 32,000 years or longer ago. So we don't have to dig through this, but some sites significantly predate the time frame of ice-free corridors, thus suggesting there were additional coastal migration routes available, traversed either by foot or in boats. So now we're talking about 30,000 years ago, traveling by boats much longer ago. So this is an important point as to how we're getting, multiple groups of people. So now that we've established that, I went down a big rabbit hole. Family tree DNA. A lot of people are turning in their DNA to these services to look at their lineage. Well, there's an Oregon man, discovers his lineage is shared with an ancient man whose remains were found in the Nevada's Lovelock Cave. Their lineage is distinct to all other previously known paternal lineages, helping researchers to further understand early human migratory patterns in the Americas.
Wow.
Let's see a picture of this guy.
I don't have a picture of this guy.
Come on.
We can pull him up. But so it's kind of cool that we're looking at Lovelock, and I find this story about DNA evidence of Lovelock, and it's the only, or at least the first, test that actually shows that the Lovelock man was, now we're DNA validating that he was not a Paleo-Indian.
Yeah.
So we'll go through this lineage. So the lineage shared between this gentleman named Segura and the Lovelock Four split apart from the rest of the Q lineages. The Q lineage is the Paleo-Indian. During the Pleistocene era, a time when the ice-free corridor was impassable and the only entryway to the unglaciated Americas, including Oregon and Nevada, was along the Pacific coast. Could their shared lineage be evidence of an early coastal migration, a signature that was almost entirely lost upon the subsequent arrival of the QM3, which would then become the dominant lineage across both continents? And there's some more, DNA details here. But basically, we can go through here. I ended up verifying the haplogroup just to make sure. And we have here the YP 4010 goes back to 13,000 BCE. And this is this gentleman's DNA lineage. So
Wow.
the Lovelock Cave, the only sample they were allowed to test, came out that, yes, indeed, the oral traditions are true. These were totally different people. They weren't even in America, at the same time period until they met. So their lineage was totally over in Central Asia, Eastern Europe.
Wow.
So, yeah, this is just going over the other lineages here.
It says,
And this is, yes.
it said Lovelock man.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
his. So this is,
He lived between 126 and 313 Common Era.
I'm sorry, I skipped a slide. So this was the actual DNA from the Lovelock 4. They're stating that up to 313 CE, the late Neolithic age, and yeah, that ties to the lineage of there it is there, the 17883 goes back. We can trace it back at least 13,000 years. That this is different from the when it's split to the Q53, which is the Paleo-Indian haplogroup. Sorry.
The watcher found a photo, but he has gray hair. It's not red.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe when he was younger.
Yeah. So this is just more, okay, this is the actual from NIH. I just had to verify that, these DNA studies were legit. So this is just more information. And this is kind of fascinating. The QL53 Y chromosomes have been described in Central Asia. Recently, QL53 have been reported in 5 Eastern European subjects as belonging to the nucleid YP4004. These findings also suggest that Central Asian QL53 Y chromosomes described above belong to the QYP4004 branch. Interestingly, one ancient specimen from the Lovelock Cave in Nevada, dated 1.8 KY, falls in this clade, representing only the only evidence of this lineage in America. So then I'll complete this. Therefore, L53 likely originated in Central Asia and before spreading differentiated into QYP4004 and QL54. So this is, in terms of a DNA find, this is incredible because we only have one specimen out of this whole lineage that split 15,000 years ago. And we only have one.
Yeah. So there's fine print down there that says Lovelock 4 has been found to have a haplotype, which is a Eurasian haplotype originating in the Copper Bronze Age Central Asia. This finding suggests there may have been genetic exchange between ancient populations in Central Asia and the Americas, challenging the traditional view of the peopling of the Americas.
That's right.
That's great.
Wow.
Yeah, buddies.
Good find.
Yeah.
Dang.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. I went pretty deep just on Lovelock. So I have, 600 giant stories, and this is one. I went way too deep on this one, but this seemed to be ultra important because it's not just we have 10-foot skeleton, we have 8-foot skeleton, we have massive skulls that could be double the size of a human skull. Now we have an oral tradition that says these people came, on boats. And then we have DNA evidence proving that these people were not hanging around in America interbreeding with the Paleo Indians. They were a separate tribe of people that were invaders.
Yeah. Wow. And just think of this. So they get one sample from one piece of bone, and it opens up this mystery, and this is why, I understand the repatriation of ancestral remains, you know, but at the same time, you're just like, but you know, like what do we not know because we couldn't take samples from everything, and you know,
Yeah.
it's just a tough problem.
Yeah, and there's what is cool is some of the tribes, after working with archaeologists and scientists in the DNA field, they now understand that they only need a tiny fragment, and so now they're allowing a lot of DNA sampling so that the tribe can see their lineage.
Yeah. Okay. That's great.
And so we're opening this realm up. This is just kind of happening, and we'll get into a piece where the Spirit Cave gentlemen, they also allowed DNA testing on.
Yeah. Because it's one thing to be like, you have the bones of my ancestors in a basement under your museum. Like, we want them
I got
back.
stories of that. We're going to get into that terrible stuff too, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm glad you guys are pumped. I thought this was an incredible find, linking this Lovelock DNA change.
Yeah,
So I'm glad you guys are enjoying
That's awesome. And maybe, you know, if they took these bones and they've reburied them in an undisclosed place, hopefully they didn't bury them in such a way that we couldn't get back in there and get samples if they want to let people do that, if they want to let further studies go. Because I know in some of these cases they pour concrete over the whole thing and you can't get to it, even if you wanted to.
I'll tell you another terrible thing. They hand them to the Bureau of Land Management, and then the Bureau of Land Management picks the location and doesn't tell the tribe so that someone can go get them.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, someone to be buried with a sign that says, "Do science on my bones."
Do science on my bones.
Yeah.
No matter what my descendants say.
Right. Oh, my gosh.
It'll be an urn. They'll be like, "Damn it."
Right. It's ashes.
That's not what I asked. That's not what I meant.
Well, if you have an urn, you should have like a note inside the urn that says, "Gotcha."
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
You know? Or you could say something like, "I didn't want anybody to practice cannibalism on me, so."
Try to do science on this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. So, okay. So I ended up just making sure, because I had to make sure, because I just wanted to, but this actually, the lineage here, the YP 4004, is Western Russia is where they're finding. So this is the Central Eurasia. So I just confirmed it through, I actually started learning about haplogroups and made sure. I was like, I need to just see this myself.
Yeah.
So there, anyway, if you guys look at, if you're doing the audio, if you go to the YouTube, you'll see, you can actually go and look up these lineages yourself.
The Russians.
So where does if we're looking at QL53, it almost perfectly lines up with this Copper Bronze Age 3000 BC, 2000 BC, the corded wares, the Yamnayas, and the Fatiyanovo, Balanovo people, and Shintashta. So this is actually where the spread of this is my hypothesis, that the people that actually came over and were mean to the Paiutes were of this origin of people.
Mm. The corded ware, they're named after their pottery, right? That's
right.
The pottery, but where they pressed, it looks like they pressed ropes or cords into the clay to leave the pattern. Isn't that what it is? Corded ware? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what else they had, though? They had copper and then eventually bronze arrowheads.
Mm.
So I would like to piece that in there. That, we've been looking at this copper finds, and we looked at Cahokia, and there was a bunch of, there's been proven that the DNA was very diverse there. Up to 30% of the people there were traveling from other parts of the world, not just of the local tribes, and they presented copper.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So here's the story of the Spirit Cave from the Seattle Times. And actually, Russ, if you would, can you read this? This is a 2 or 3 part story. It'd be great.
Yeah, I can. Crossing from Asia, the first Americans rushed into the unknown. Nearly 11,000 years ago, a man died in what is now Nevada, wrapped in a rabbit skin blanket and reed mats. He was buried in a place called Spirit Cave. On November 8th, a team of scientists reported that they had successfully recovered the man's entire genome, by itself an important scientific development. But the man from Spirit Cave is not alone. In their latest study, published in the journal Science, the team reported discovering DNA from a second ancient Beringian, an individual who lived 9,000 years ago in western Alaska. The ancient Beringians seem to have endured for several thousand years, but then they disappeared, leaving no known genetic trace in living people. But another wave of migrants from Siberia did not stop in Alaska. They kept moving, eventually reaching south of the Ice Age glaciers. They split into 2 branches between 17,500 and 14,600 years ago. One group turned and headed north, following the retreating glaciers into Canada and back to Alaska. The other branch took a remarkable journey south. The genetic data suggested that this group spread swiftly across much of North America and South America about 14,000 years ago. The expansion may have taken only centuries. It's basically an explosion, Willerslev said. This is a guy that's doing the study.
Yes.
Okay. The man from Spirit Cave in Nevada belonged to this southern branch of migrants. Willerslev also found that the man was closely related to a 12,700-year-old boy found on the other side of the Rocky Mountains in Montana. This is the Anzac One. But the man from Spirit Cave also turned out to have a close genetic link to a 10,400-year-old skeleton, or skeletons found in Brazil on the other side of the equator. David Reich of Harvard Medical School reconstructed the ancestry of Native Americans living in North and South America. They reported their findings last week in Nature, based on a genetic analysis of 52 modern Native American groups and 17 Siberian groups. The researchers concluded the majority of Native Americans descend from a single Siberian population.
And that piece is from Smithsonian.com. So sorry I clicked you through, but this is related. So what we have is, again, way more evidence now from Spirit Cave, which is related and very close to Lovelock Cave, is that we have 2 completely different sets of genetic lines again, and from much longer ago. So the reason I pull this in is because of the oral traditions I feel are being validated, that there are many different groups of people coming to America and interrupting, which this is my opinion. Now, I think that the Paleo Indians were here much longer than we originally said, and that there's second and third waves of people coming, potentially on boats, as we read, which is wild and revelatory to me, that now that standard science is saying that people had boats 12,000 years ago
or more.
Or more. And they're, populating the western side of North and South America tens of thousands of years ago, and then getting into warfare.
Yeah. Wow.
Cool.
That's cool that they've connected them too. Yeah, we need to take a break. I also love the story that they come in and they split into 2 groups, right? One group goes south, discovers all of the Americas, down through Mexico, Central America, all the way down to South America. The other group follows the ice and circles back around and ends up where they started. And they're like, God damn it.
Yeah.
We're going in circles.
Yeah. Oh, man.
We were already here.
Yeah. And it's like, it took us 200 years to, whatever. And then, wow, we're right back where we started.
I knew we should have asked directions. Yeah.
Lame.
All right, let's take a break.
All right.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, joined by Professor Shy. Part 2 of Evidence for Giants. And we're going to keep going on the presentation here. So where were we? Where were we, Matt? What were we doing here?
Yeah, so we just basically went over the end of the genetic analysis that there was at least 2 groups of people that genetically split 15,000 years ago.
Yeah.
David
And
Reich.
then, what's that? Okay, whatever. Okay. So anyway, this is the basically Paleo-Indian. If you look at the over 90% of the North and South American native peoples, Paleo-Indians, come from this one region in Siberia.
Wow.
Yeah, and then like we already discussed, the other haplogroup is coming from thousands of miles away that are in Western Asia, Eastern Europe, and stretching to Mesopotamia, Copper culture, beet culture, Bronze Age, and these peoples collided at some point in the past. So I just have a quick, just validating that people were there. This was a recent find, which is also in the region, 23,000-year-old footprints preserved. The reason why they dated it 23,000 is because of the seeds. They were able to radiocarbon date and those human prints. So that's 23,000 years ago, way older than we previously put people in America. And in conclusion,
a lot of those prints were small.
Yeah.
So they could be children or adolescents, but it's interesting because, we're discussing this possibility of giants, but these prints, at least the ones that they've talked about, are all small prints.
For sure. Yeah, and the reason why I bring this into my evidence of the court is merely that there were multiple groups of people way earlier than we thought, not that these people were giants.
I just wonder, maybe there are some giant footprints. They're just not mentioning them.
I have something on that.
All right.
So, did earlier people use boats to rapidly populate America? Well, now I'm hoping everyone's leaning with me that they probably did. This is not that old, but this is a slide of, it goes up to 25,000 years ago, initial peopling of Beringia. And then the swift peopling of the Americas, we went over that, that they made it south really fast. So now modern science says that the shoreline boats are a possible answer for the explosive expansion of the Americas, further cementing the strangers coming from boats from the west. This could potentially put the indigenous tribe timeline back well beyond the 15,000 years, which basically is accepted. And then a second set of sailors, in quotes, came through anywhere from 3,000 to 15,000 years ago, validating both the DNA evidence and the stories of the Paiutes and the pre-Incan tribes, which we're going to get into right now.
Awesome.
But more on that later. Patented 134589 by Marty. Shout out Marty. Oh, one last thing on this boat thing. I found this today. 8,000 years before present, a city discovered in 2019, and then this year just found a boatyard, April 27th, 2024, 8,000 years old, off the coast of England here. I thought this was very interesting. Now, this is the oldest known boatyard in the world.
Wow.
And I wrote, "Hey, Dibble-Doo, can you take a look at this?" Full jab, okay?
Nailed
him. Nailed him.
No. They've done lots of archaeology.
I know. Well, bro, guess what? This is brand new. I mean, this is super cool. A whole city with a boatyard 8,000 years ago. This just validates kind of like, yeah, people were on boats way longer than we thought.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How come we haven't found any of those boats sunk?
Well, okay.
Sorry, I'm
well,
just doing the dibble thing.
Yeah, okay. I will tell you, Mr. Dibble. So in this particular case, the English Channel, the tide and the currents are incredibly strong in this channel. And so what has happened is even though things have been preserved in the city that's been sunken, things are, torn up and torn apart. So smaller pieces have been ripped and pushed away into the deep ocean because of this English Channel. So there you go.
There you go.
All right.
And this is my summary of Lovelock, which we don't really need to read out loud. We really went over all of the everything about Lovelock. So that completes my Lovelock segment.
All right.
So
Bravo,
okay.
Professor.
Yes, bravo.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a lot of fun doing Lovelock, and then the rabbit holes. I really enjoyed it. So thanks, guys. We're going to move into Central and South America, and I start this with an article from 2013. No signs of disease, acromegaly, or gigantism in the recent giant skeleton find. Skeletal remains in Ecuador and Peru. In late 2013, Dement received word that a skeleton had been uncovered by a Shuar local approximately 70 miles from Suencia, in Loja province, Ecuador. Dement traveled to the site and recovered a rib cage and a skull of a female that had been exposed by flooding. The bones were thought to date 600 years ago. The rest of the skeleton was located and once assembled, reportedly measured 7 feet 4 inches for a female.
Wow. Yeah.
That's really big for a female, but it gets better. This prompted the formation of a research team, including 4 researchers from Freie Universität, in Germany, and the assistance of Shuar locals. Funding was provided by the university for excavation and investigation. Recognizing it is a controversial area of research, Dement noted, even though I had been working with Freie for many years, I was concerned that they might not give a grant for someone looking for giants. To outsiders, especially scientists, I understand this sounds a little harebrained. The skeletons show no signs of disease, such as the hormonal growth problems that are most common in most cases of gigantism. In all the skeletons, the joints seemed healthy and lung cavity appeared large. One of the skeletons that we have dated was of a female who was about 60 when she died, much older than typical cases of gigantism. Reports Suencia High Life. So this was compelling to me because here's an actual university in recent times, 2013.
Hold on.
Oh, yeah. Where's my...
Yeah, there you go. Woo!
All right.
Woo, buddy. So
compelling.
it is compelling. Sorry. Okay, moving along. But yeah, what do you guys think about this? 7'4" female with no gigantism.
Is there follow-up? That was in 2013. That's the question. It's like, did they find more? What's the results of the research? Because, yeah, it's very interesting.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Easily, if this is a genetic trait, I mean, you can imagine the men being over 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
Right. So I will follow up for you.
All right.
But I did case closed on this. Like, case closed, no gigantism, 7'4" female, boom, proof. So I closed it at that. I didn't go into a Lovelock deep dive like, okay, let's do 2 hours on this one lady. Sorry.
Right.
So, okay, so that is my precursor to the Central and South Americas, right? So now that we've established there's people without gigantism, 7'4", boom. Now we have Codex Vaticanus A / the Codex Rios from 1556. It's a Spanish gentleman, but it was written in Italian for the Vatican. Some people were saying, oh, the missionaries or conquistadors, drew the pictures. So I made sure, did some research on that. Guess what? This drawing was done by the indigenous people. And this is a Aztec of Mexico. And this was intended for a presentation, is someone in the Vatican, basically. But if you take a look, for people who aren't watching YouTube, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16 men that have 3 ropes, and they have them tied to a massive man. It looks at 8, 9, 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
With his guts spilled out, and dragging this dude. What looks to be they're dragging him over the fire to burn this massive body.
Yeah.
So this is again
Burning giants. That's what you do.
Yeah, you got to set them on fire. Yeah.
They probably didn't want him to come back from the dead,
Yeah.
But again, we have indigenous people telling their story, which was oral.
Yeah.
And then they were asked, to draw the account of this oral tradition.
Man.
So now we're going to Peru. Captain Juan Almos in 1543. When the Captain Juan de Almos, a native of Trujillo, was lieutenant governor at Puerto Viejo, he caused excavations to be made in the valley, having heard of these matters. This is a matter of large remains. They found ribs and bones so large that if the heads had not appeared at the same time, it would not have been seemed credible that they were the remains of human beings.
Wow.
Now, here's one of the most interesting stories because it's corroborated. And I actually bought this book. It was a reprint, obviously, but I bought a reprint of the 1800s, The Travels of Pedro de Cieza de Leon, who was a Spanish conquistador. And so he chronicled his adventures of Peru. And actually, Russ, if you could read this, because this has 2 or 3 parts to it.
This is from the 1550?
1550, yes, 1550.
Okay. As there is in Peru a story of some giants who landed on the coast at the point of Santa Elena in the vicinity of the city of Puerto Viejo, I have resolved to mention what I was told about them as I understood it, without taking into account the opinions of the common people and their various anecdotes, for they usually magnify events larger than life. The natives, repeating a story received from their forefathers from very remote times, say that there came from across the sea on reed rafts that were as large as big ships some men that were so big that an ordinary man of good size scarcely reached up to their knees. Their members were in proportion to the size of their bodies, and it is a monstrous thing to see their enormous heads and their hair hanging down about their shoulders. Their eyes were as large as small plates. They say they had no beards, and that some of them were clad in the skins of animals, and others only in the dress that nature gave them. There were no women with them. On reaching this point, they set up their camp like a village, and even in these times there is a memory of the site of their houses. As they found no supply of water, they remedied the lack by making some very deep wells, a labor certainly worthy of record, being undertaken by such strong men as these must have been, to judge by their size. They dug these wells in the living rock until they came to the water, and afterwards they built the wells in stone from the waterline upwards so that they would last for ages. In these wells the water is excellent, and it is always so cold that it is very pleasant to drink. When these great men or giants had thus made their settlement and dug these wells or cisterns, they destroyed and ate all the supplies they could find in the neighborhood. It is said that one of them ate more than 50 of the natives of the land, and as the supply of food was not sufficient for them to maintain themselves, they caught much fish with nets and gear that they had. They lived in continuous hostility with the natives because they slew the latter's women in order to have them, and they also slew the men for other reasons. But the Indians were not numerous enough to kill these newcomers who occupied their land and lorded it over them. And although they held great discussions about this, they never dared attack them. After some years, the giants were still in this region, and as they had no women of their own and the Indian women of the neighborhood were too small for them, or else because the vice was habitual to them and inspired by the demon, they practiced the unspeakable and horrible sin of sodomy, committing it openly and in public without fear of God or personal shame. The natives say that our Lord God, unwilling to conceal so wicked a sin, sent them a punishment suited to the beastliness of the crime. And when all the giants were together engaged in this accursed practice, there came a fearful fire from heaven, to the accompaniment of a great noise, in the midst of which a shining angel appeared, holding a sharp, bright sword, with which he slew them all at a single stroke. And the fire consumed them, leaving only a few bones and skulls, which God allowed to remain unconsumed as a token of the punishment. I see you've got a question there. Meteor? Yeah.
Yeah. And there's just so you know, I went through a couple translations because some of the newer translations would say, for instance, one of them ate more than 50 natives at a time,
Oof.
right? So the correct translation, to be clear, is that they would eat more food than 50 natives would eat of food.
Right.
So you kind of have to go through. I did make sure we got some good translations. And if you listen to some of the non-conquistador Christian influence stories, it sounds more like a meteor. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is the first account. We're going to see a second account in which it's not nearly as influenced with the conquistadors. Doesn't mention, the Christian God.
Yeah.
And it sounds more like a meteor. So we'll go over that. So continue.
Well, it's also, I just want to mention, like, the description there, and like you were saying, it sounds like a meteor. Like, some of that description is very similar to stuff we went over with Randall on Tunguska, the idea of a sword in the sky that just destroys the ground.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So continuing, this is the account they give of the giants, and we believe that it happened, for it is said that very large bones have been found and are still found thereabouts, and I have heard Spaniards say that they have seen pieces of teeth which they thought must have weighed 1/2 pound when whole, and who had also seen a piece of a shin bone of wonderful size, all of which bears witness to the truth of the incident. Okay, so another question here is it possible that some of these bones they're finding could be of, like, megafauna, not actual people?
Yeah, and
yeah.
There's a distinction. So we can, as sleuths, they do piece together, what they believe is accurate people, and they cooperate with a few other people with these natives over the years. Different people go and speak to them, and they tell the same story, and then they actually show the well and some of the bones. But absolutely, like a 1/2 pound tooth. Could have been megafauna.
Yeah.
But the core of the story, if you wipe some of the opinion of these people, the oral tradition is there concealed, in the story.
Yeah. All right. Got it. Okay. Okay. So in addition to this, one can see the places where the sites of their villages were, and also the wells or cisterns they made. I cannot state whence or how these giants came there. In the present year of 1550, when in the city of Lima, I heard that when His Excellency Don Antonio de Mendoza was viceroy and governor of New Spain, certain bones of men as big as these giants, and even bigger, were found there. I have heard, too, that in an ancient sepulchre in the city of Mexico or somewhere else in that kingdom, certain bones of giants have been found. Since so many people saw them and attest having done so, it can therefore be credited that such giants did exist, and indeed they may all have been of the same race. At this point of Santa Elena, which is, as I have said, on the coast of Peru and in the district of the city of Puerto Viejo, there is a remarkable phenomenon, the existence of certain wells or seams of pitch of such excellent quality that it would be possible to tar all the ships one wished with it, since it flows from the earth. This pitch must be from some seam passing through that place. It comes out very hot, etc.
Okay, so we can talk about that. There's definitely the conquistador influence. So, just reading the one story doesn't seem like completely viable. But anyway, it's a very detailed retelling of the locals' accounts.
Yeah.
And terrible giants. It was a bad giant.
Very bad giants. Yeah.
Woo! I would not want to deal with them. So if we move on to 1555, Augustin de Zarate, Discovering History, Conquest of Peru. He goes to Peru himself and talks to different locals. We don't have to read this whole story unless you want to. Did you want to compare them, or you want me to just give you the summary?
Yeah, I can try to read it. It's kind of small. Around this country, on a promontory that the Spanish call Santa Elena, there are certain veins extending into the sea which contain bitumen, which looks like something. Alquitran. And the Indians say that giants of great stature inhabited the land at this point, 4 times as large as a man. They do not say whence these came, but they sustained that. But that's interesting because in the other story they were saying they came on giant reed rafts, right?
Well, the giants didn't tell them where they came from, but
okay.
But
they do not say whence these came, but they sustained themselves on the same foodstuffs, according to these same Indians, especially fish, because they were great fishermen, and went in balsa or reed and also wood boats, each one in his own, because the rafts could not carry more than one, though they could carry 3 horses. They could wade into the sea 2 fathoms and a half, and disported themselves in taking many types of sharks, dolphins, and other large fish. But because they needed to eat so much, each one ate more than 30 Indians, and they went naked because of the difficulty they had in making themselves clothes. And they were so cruel that without any apparent cause they would kill many Indians who greatly feared them. The Spaniards in Puerto Viejo saw 2 massive sculptured figures of these giants, a male and female, and that the Indians preserved from father to son many particulars of the giants, especially as concerned their end, which was brought about by the especially as concerned their end, which was brought about by the advent from heaven of a young man shining like the sun, who drove the giants into a valley and killed them with flames of fire, marks of which remain on the rocks still. Yet everyone gave little credence to what these Indians said until the time when Captain Juan de Olmos of Trujillo, lieutenant to the governor of Puerto Viejo in 1543, hearing about them, caused excavations to be made in the valley, which laid bare enormous ribs and bones, which if they had not appeared with their heads, would not have been believed to be of human beings. But with this confirmation, and seeing the marks of the thunderbolts on the rocks, what the Indians had said was taken for true. They sent to different parts of Peru some teeth that had been found there, each of which was 3 fingers wide and 4 fingers long. These things have convinced the Spaniards that it is as they said, that these people were much given to unnatural vice, and divine justice removed them from the earth, sending some angel for them, as happened at Sodom and other places.
So, I think it's got a lot of different pieces, but the same story. But here we go again with, reed balsas boats, and then cannibalistic giants, and as we were going through earlier, natives from a completely different part of the Americas are giving a very similar account of some nasty peoples, thousands of years apart.
Yeah, the teeth, 3 fingers wide, 4 fingers long. That's those are big teeth.
Yeah. Those are huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, okay, maybe it's megafauna. We know that we find human remains with megafauna.
Yeah.
But
he's saying they found skulls with the ribs and other stuff. So, yeah. Now the question is, where do these bones go?
Around this time, like for instance, if it was an elephant, a mastodon, mammoth, either around this time they would be able to define it, or a little bit earlier in history they would call them the Cyclops, right? So it's easy. Sometimes, oh, it's a Cyclops. So that's an elephant or elephant style with a big central hole, right?
Yeah.
So we're not seeing, that type of skeleton. And then also, again, I mean, I'm hoping at this point, in my opinion, this oral tradition gives a lot of weight.
Yeah, and by the way, it says that they would wade 2.5 fathoms out, and Watcher says that's 15 feet.
Yeah, there you go.
That they were like walking out into the water 15 feet deep and fishing.
Thank you. I didn't even look up how much a fathom was. It's unfathomable. So, okay, that's the end of Peru. We corroborated that with three stories, okay? Huge. They were so huge.
Also note the marks of the thunderbolts on the rocks. This is interesting because, if you go back, you find out that thunderbolt was often, they would refer to meteors basically as thunderbolts.
Mm.
Now we associate it with lightning strikes. But it's also, they called everything thunderbolts from the sky.
Got it.
Yeah.
The thing I noticed about it was the story about the young man who drove them away.
Oh, yeah.
It's very much like the story of David and Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. This one seems also influenced by Christianity as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I have some of that later too, which...
And they're comparing it to
dig
Sodom
into.
and other places.
Yeah.
For sure. This is the conquistadors trying to push Christianity on the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So for sure, they took liberties, and it sucks because
They're
we
like-
can't. And it sucks.
You can see this happening. Like the natives were like, there were giants here, and the conquistadors are like, but a young man destroyed them, right?
Yeah.
As it
Right.
says in the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But the story, I believe the story's still there. And actually, I don't know if Graham Hancock in his books goes through the Viracocha stuff, but I did some research on Viracocha, and I verified that there indeed was the pre-Incan cultures, the Mochicha, that in 700 AD they were making bearded, robed men figurines, right? So I just had to see, like, because if you go down that path, people say this story was heavily influenced by the conquistadors and the new world explorers. But guess what? There was a Viracocha that was bearded and had robes, maybe even back to 100 AD, but for sure at least 700 AD, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's a bunch of the Viracocha stuff in Graham's books for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
I didn't read them, so because I've only read like 12 books now, so but absolutely, just if we want to validate, these stories were there, even though they were influenced. The stories and evidence exists that it's the same story, and it's just like, let me put my little twist on it, which is too bad. But we have to look and say, the oral tradition was there.
Yeah.
Right.
I see what you're saying. When you're reading this, you can see, like, here's the story that these Spaniards are being told, and they're sort of putting their kind of biblical opinion onto it.
Exactly. Yeah. So unfortunate, but let's cherish the oral tradition.
Yeah.
And actually, one of these accounts, one of the Central American tribes actually kept records, which is pretty wild. There's not a story of giants, but of invading peoples, and they had records on ropes. And we won't get too much into that, but basically, like Morse code, and their library was actually ropes, and they would the elder would rub the rope and have the story on the rope.
Is that a Kipu or Quipu?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
So, these these methods of keeping history being unedited, in my opinion, is getting edited less than a lot of times when you're writing it down, such as these conquistadors who have taken a story that was accurate for, 10,000 years or 2,000 years, and then, I'm going to add a little flavor. Thanks a lot, bud.
Right.
So these are not deep dives. These are just fun. These are just fun stories from Central and South America. We'll move on to the Chronicle of Father Cristobal de Acuna, where he mentions having seen 10 and 12 feet high peoples, 1639. In the Nuevo Descubrimiento de Grande de las Amazonas, or the new discovery of the great river of the Amazons. He recounts his journey and encounters in the Amazon region. Here's a translation of the section where he describes meeting giants. 2 days after our arrival at the island on the Amazon River, while we were preparing to continue our journey, some Indians came to us saying that in the neighborhood of the mountain there was a race of giants, and that they had just captured one of them. We were amazed at this news and desired to see the giant. He was brought to us, and we found him to be a man of extraordinary height, about 12 feet, and well proportioned. His body was covered with hair, and his appearance was wild and terrifying. He spoke to us in a language we could not understand, and we could gather no information from him regarding his origin or his race. After some time, he escaped from his captors and disappeared into the forest, leaving us astonished at the sight of this prodigy of nature.
So this is a wild man story.
Yeah.
Again, going back to the Bigfoot hunters, these stories being connected to giants is interesting, and the Bigfoot stuff. And maybe there is a crossover here, but there are plenty of wild men stories where basically people are finding men, but they're totally covered in hair. Sometimes they're very large or extremely strong and completely feral. And there's stories like this from Europe and the Americas up until recent times.
And I got to tell you this, by the way, this guy's traveling around the great river of the Amazon. I mean, this is a several 100-page book, and this is just like a casual deep in the book, page 63. It's not like he wrote a book that was like, I found giants. He writes all of this stuff, like very detailed account of the tribes of the Amazons. He's describing in great detail the forest, the fauna, the river, the climate, how the people are interacting and trading. And then, he's like, and this happened. I mean, but then he moves on.
Yeah.
Then he goes, okay, so anyway, then we continue down the Amazon and we get to this place we were going, and he describes it some more.
Yeah.
He doesn't make it like, this is a huge point. This is like a little hidden point, which makes me feel like, he didn't want to fabricate, in my opinion, he didn't just want to fabricate a story about giants. He wrote a book for somebody.
I would be interested to know how accurate the rest of his travelogue descriptions are, like of the animals, the people, or even just like maybe forget even the tribes of people and just say like, how is his description of the river, the trees, the flora and the fauna, because it's like, if this guy is basically a good observer and then he's like, oh yeah, and then they brought us this 12-foot man and we were like, holy crap, that guy's really tall, and then he escaped, and then we continued on our travel, and here's a drawing of the purple spotted warbler or whatever, bird that I saw.
Yeah.
So in other words, if he's a good observer on everything else,
right,
then that lends credence to this story.
Yeah. And so if I had time, I would have validated him too, just like I did Lovelock, right? Where you go and say, okay, well, here's a lot of other valid observations, valid evidence. Look at the validity of this oral tradition. And then this is their story, right?
Yeah.
So for sure.
All right. Can we take a break here?
Let's take a break.
All right. One more break, folks. And we will be right back with segment 4, Evidence for Giants, part 2.
are back for the final segment of the final hour of this excellent episode on giants. Thank you, Matt Shy. Professor Shy, that is. You gotta address him by his proper title.
Yeah.
Indeed.
But I'm planning a protest at your school.
Oh,
Gonna protest
you
the
should.
destruction of giants.
Yeah, you're right. I'm debunking. This was supposed to be a presentation about giants, and I'm debunking giants. It's terrible.
I'm gonna hold up in one of your school buildings, create an encampment.
Wow.
You can
I
try
like
to
how you
burn me
brought
out.
relevant information to our
can-
presentation, my friend.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. Just like I don't know if the Celts had red hair. I don't know what you're talking about. Cool, guys. Well, since we're back and you've encamped yourself at my school, I will just
Give me
lecture
more
you.
stories.
Exactly. I will. Here we go.
All right.
So another story which I did not cite, and I've cited everything else. I'm very sorry, but this is another story about the Amazon River, the River of Giants. And this is just a quick one with no background info on it. 10 leagues from above the place of the province of Yoreman ends, and 2 leagues further on the south side, is the mouth of the famous river, which the Indians call the Chuquicuragua. It is navigable. Although there are rocks in some places, it has plenty of fish, a great number of turtle, an abundance of maize and mendoik, and all the things requisite for facilitating entrance of an expedition. This river is peopled by various nations, which begin at the mouth and going upwards and are as follows. And he names off a bunch of tribes, which I'm not even going to try. They have the same name as the river and then many other peoples. And finally, there are the Kurigiris, who, according to of the information of those who had seen them and who offered to guide us to their country, are giants of 16 palms in height, very brave, going naked, and having great plates of gold in their ears and noses. To reach their villages, it takes 2 months continual traveling from the mouth of the Chuquicuragua.
Wow.
Plates of gold.
Yeah. They're going around naked, but they've got gold. That's cool.
That's all you need, bro.
So what's 16 palms? Yeah, they got bling.
Watcher? Depends on how big your palms are. If you're measuring a horse,
Yeah, my guess would be that it's 16 hands, essentially the same, like a measurement for a horse, which is, that's big. That's a big horse.
Yeah. Okay.
a 16-hand horse, that's 8 or 9 feet. 8, 7, well, with his head up, was it 7, 8 feet? Be faster, Watcher.
Jono.
Moving along. So, 1620, the Jesuit Pablo Jose Arriaga. In 1620, the Jesuit priest and missionary Pablo Jose Arriaga, in his manuscript, on the eradication of idolatry in Peru. Terrible stuff going on here. He wrote the following. Yeah. They, representatives of the Spanish inspectors, led us to the other side of the village, where there was a very large cave, and the remains of giants lay in it. Among them were 3 giant bodies with deformed heads, elongated skulls, wrapped in kombai, which is ceremonial fabric. These giants were considered the ancestors of all these people in the village who worshipped and worshipped them. Even sacrifices were made in their honor. Then the Spaniards burned all the bodies. The end.
Giants with long heads.
Always burning giants.
And I almost went on a 2-week rabbit hole on elongated skulls, but that's for another time. And I think this is going to wrap up our Central South American for now, which is good. We have more, but these are just some of the fascinating ones. Bernal Diaz de Castillo, True History of the Conquest of New Spain, Chapter 78. Our friends, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it, the Zito Connectal and the Talzal texts of Maxcatzin of Ocotelocco, the two kings, told us how and whence the Aztecs came into this country and how they had settled themselves there, how it came that notwithstanding their vicinity to the Mexicans, they resembled each other so little and lived in perpetual warfare with each other. The tradition was also handed down from them, their forefathers, that in ancient times there lived here a race of men and women who were of immense stature with heavy bones, and were a very bad and evil disposed people, whom they had for a greater part exterminated by continual war, and the few that were left gradually died away. In order to give us a notion of the huge frame of this people, they dragged forth a bone, or rather a thigh bone, one of those giants, which was very strong and measured the length of a man in good stature. The bone was still entire from the knee to the hip joint. I measured it by my own person and found it to be of my own length, although I am a man of considerable height. Sure you are, Bernard. Even if you're 4.5 feet, that's still huge, buddy. They showed us many similar pieces of bones, but they were all worm eaten and decayed. We, however, did not doubt for an instant that this country was once inhabited by giants. Cortez observed that we ought to forward these bones to His Majesty in Spain at the very first opportunity. So if we peek into the truth in this, we're talking about again an oral tradition where they're keeping bones, and they have told this conquistador their oral tradition and tried to show him evidence, right?
Yeah.
So the watcher is pointing out that 16 hands is roughly 5.33 feet.
Oh man.
So it was very short people. They were like, this guy was huge. It was probably like this guy. He was like, yes, I'm very tall. I am a man of considerable height.
Yeah, exactly.
5.33
Ah, well,
feet.
that's what it was a little clip in there. So cancel that. That's getting deleted from the presentation.
Well,
But,
it may be there's variations on the measurements.
Right.
They're not a very good standard.
Yeah. He says the measurement palm is a Roman measurement, meaning 4 inches. So the usage here must be one I'm not familiar with. Yeah. So 16 palms is not very tall, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, now we're making him even shorter. This was a huge man of 3 feet, right? Yeah. All right.
But this guy is saying that the femur basically is as long as a
person.
as the average Spaniard at the time, which would be what, 5.5 feet, something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, if he's good stature, 5.5 feet he would be tall. 5.5, he'd be a man of good stature.
He's a man of considerable height. Yeah. 5.5
Exactly.
feet tall. But that's a long femur.
Yeah.
And that question is, of course, is it a human bone?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I
Still doesn't discount the
Danny-
story that they had.
Right.
They're just telling stories about these giants that were there.
Yeah. And then one of them was like, he's like, he doesn't believe it.
Show me a big bone.
Yeah. And then the natives are like, go get the mammoth bone. Show this guy.
Yeah.
Go get the mammoth bone. We'll show him a giant.
Yeah. Exactly. Go get that whale bone. That's why they're worm ridden, because we just killed this whale on the shore. Yeah, but for sure they told an oral tradition. That's really the core.
That's the point.
Oral tradition. People of immense stature from a different race or a different culture that came around, and they were in perpetual warfare. This is the point that I found interesting. These conquistadors can exaggerate, but are the people of the oral tradition exaggerating? Right?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, to be honest, this is just my opinion. From what I've been looking at in the previous presentations, I don't think the oral traditions are being manipulated. And if only we could talk to these people direct and get their oral tradition, we would have the entire truth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it does seem that, like, in some cases, you know, that the oral traditions have shown to be very accurate, especially considering that they're carrying information across thousands of years.
Right. And two easy examples, 37,000-year-old volcanic eruption
Yeah.
with details. And another example is the Paiutes.
Right.
Anywhere, could be thousands of years old, right? And the story was told before the evidence was found. So.
Right. All right. The Watcher says he's maybe figured out the palm thing. So yeah, go ahead, buddy. Tell us what you figured out.
Oh, in colonial Spain, the measurements, they had a unit of measurement called the vara, which was just under a meter, and also the palmo, or palm, which was from the pinky, the tip of the pinky, across to the tip of the thumb. It was roughly 9 inches. So 16 palms is 144 inches.
Yeah, so 12 feet.
12 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Just about.
Thank you.
All right.
You think
Very
I would tell a
welcome.
story for 3-foot man? Come on, guys.
He was
I
real
was
tall.
trying to dupe you. Trying to dupe you guys. You were duped. You
No.
took my 3-foot story. Sweet. All right.
Yeah, you should send that story to LPs if only 3 feet. He's the one that does the little people stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Wrong show. Wrong episode.
Wrong guest.
Print. Delete. Let me get my annotation out and just scribble on the screen for you, okay? So that's that's all the main stories of Central South America that I'm going to share right now. There is more, but let's move on to something different, which is pretty close. We could consider it almost Central America. The Catalina Islands is right there off of the coast of California. This one has a lot of information. I didn't do a mega deep dive, but I think you guys will be interested in this. So here's the newspaper clipping around 1913. It says, Indians are rising out of legend. At right, this skeleton of a man who was 7'8" tall reposed below the tomb in which the remains of 64 children were found. Oof. That's disturbing.
I do remember some of this, yeah.
During the expedition to the interior of Catalina, Professor Glidden collected the skeletons of 3,781 Indians. The largest he found was a man of 9 feet 2 inches tall. Practically all the male adults were of gigantic stature, averaging around 7 feet. So this sounds like kind of an exaggeration tale, but let's dig a little deeper. So the Channel Islands off the coast of California have turned up numerous oversized skeletons. 1913, Dr. A.W. Furstenan reported unearthing an 8-foot tall skeleton with artifacts such as mortar, pestles, and arrowheads on Catalina. He was told of a legend while in Mexico of a giant and noble race that lived on the island who existed long before the white man and has since vanished. So obviously this connects with our previous story, Legends of Mexico. Amateur archaeologist Ralph Glidden unearthed and collected a total of 3,781 skeletons on the Channel Islands between 1919 and 1930. Working for the Hay Foundation of New York, he unearthed a 9'2" skeleton and several measuring over 7 feet. A skeleton of a young girl, evidently of high rank within a large funeral urn, was surrounded by those of 64 children. And in various parts of the island, more than 3,000 other skeletons were found, practically all the males averaging 7 feet. Sorry, this is redundant. One being 7 foot 8 inches from the top of his head to the ankle, and another being 9 feet 2 inches tall. So this is I want to explain the Hay Foundation is a reputable foundation still to the Smithsonian Institute. So we'll go through that. The Museum of the American Indian Hay Foundation left behind a singular collection which was transferred in 1989 to the Smithsonian Institution, becoming part of the National Museum of the American Indian, which you can still see today. You can visit this on the si.com website. Glidden's Museum closed in 1950, and the remains were locked away until in 2016, all remains that I have verified were repatriated. Wendy Teeter, curator of the archaeology at UCLA's Fowler Museum, said the ceremonies were the largest repatriation of Native American remains in California history. 1959, then also in 1959, a human fragment was found on Santa Rosa Island and radiocarbon dated to be 13,000 years before present. So there's a lot of information.
Human femur.
Here.
Yeah, human.
It just you broke up there. It was a human femur fragment. Was dated to be 13,000 years old.
Sorry, I broke
Not
up.
your
I was
fault.
doing this.
You just started talking about the Smithsonian, and you were sort of breaking up.
Breaking
again.
up. Yep.
That makes sense. Makes sense. So, okay, let's break down a few things. The Museum of American Indian Hay Foundation, which is still a large contributor to the Smithsonian Institute, they hired Ralph Glidden. And so, although he was an amateur archaeologist, they found his findings to be worth paying him for, and worth paying him for 11 years. Okay?
Yeah.
So this is not some dude, presenting some skeletons and being like, "Oh, look what I found." This was funded, and it was a legitimate excavation. And so we have average 7 feet. So this is actually an astounding story, in my opinion.
Yeah. The Watcher has some additional information here. He says the National Museum of the American Indian, New York, the George Gustav Hay Center, is a branch of the National Museum of the American Indian at the Alexander Hamilton U.S. Custom House in Manhattan in New York City. This museum is part of the Smithsonian Institution.
Yep. So, but what they did is they took all of the skeletal remains and repatriated them, right?
Yeah.
So there will be no evidence on that part in terms of DNA or, further validation of height. But I would say here is a very good validation of a 9 foot 2 inch skeleton, which would place it in one of the tallest people ever discovered, ever recorded, period.
Yeah, well, at the very least, you could say this isn't part of the hoax fad, right? These were legit finds. They were documented. They went to the Smithsonian. Then they were relocated in 1989 and repatriated.
Yeah, you wouldn't repatriate a hoax.
Right.
Right. So this is to me.
And with that many people, that it's extremely unlikely that this was one of the diseases also that results in gigantism.
So let's piece it together. At almost 4,000 people, and the adults averaging 7 feet 8 inches. So I'm sorry, but averaging over 7 feet. And we have 7 foot 8 and a 9 foot 2. but
Yeah.
with an averaging of 7, I mean,
With the adult males, yeah.
with the adult males, this is this is like really for me good evidence that okay, let's correlate back to we have people on an island, okay, using boats, a tale from Mexico of a different tribe of people. I think it's just incredible and compelling. Sorry, guys, I haven't been saying compelling in a while.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and the burial thing is interesting too. It's like this girl in the urn. I remember seeing drawings of it. She's placed in the urn, and then there's all these children around her, and all of them are on top of one of these very tall male skeletons. Like they've been buried on top of it. Like they were sacrificed to the burial of this person or something.
Yeah.
It's a strange.
Yeah, it's a really strange setup.
Yeah.
But also one of the coolest finds.
Yeah.
And I just wish that they could have approached it in a different way, a respectable way, and then also being able to do our archaeological history, because I'm sure there's plenty of tribes now and people now that would love the DNA. As I was reading that a bunch of the tribes are very interested in DNA testing to prove and show, where these people have come from.
Well, that's good, because I had heard the opposite, that they don't give their DNA for research, but maybe it's changing, and that would be great.
Well, in the past decade, a few tribes have come forward to trace it. And so let's humor this. How do we over 90% of Paleo-Indian and Native DNA all comes from one haplogroup? I mean, what if only 2% of tribes are doing DNA?
Yeah.
And then they do, and we find a whole nother set of DNA.
Yeah. Yep.
So I don't know.
I think, yes, there's definitely more information there. And as if more of them come forward and give DNA, then I think we can find out some very interesting things. And I hope we do. Learning the history in a non-destructive way and in a respectful way is, I'm all about that.
Me too.
Yeah.
So do you guys want to continue? I don't know what our time is, but I mean, I have a whole segment on the Susquehannocks. I don't know how much. Yeah.
We can do that next week. I mean, we're over 2 hours now. I mean, this has been awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have so much more to share with you all. We haven't even gone through Europe, Asia, Africa, and then also crazy newspaper clippings. Okay, if we're over time, then let me just share one ridiculous newspaper clipping.
All right.
Sounds like you've got a giant presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I tried to clip it down. I actually dumped a bunch of stuff.
Seems like it's a big deal.
Oh my gosh. All right.
He's telling us some tall tales.
Yes.
Whoa! You guys,
It's going to be a huge hit.
You guys sound like some old timers. Okay. I found this amusing because I got the whole newspaper article, but we don't have to go through the whole thing. Fort Worth Daily Gazette, 12-footer. Okay. So basically, a farmer found the bones protruding from a bank in a ravine, and then they dug it out. We don't need to go through the whole thing. It said they put him together. He's 12 foot tall. What I found was amusing is that half of the ads are for bidders. Okay, so it's like, oh, are you super grumpy? Try these iron bitters? And then a lot of them, because this is old time, like 1883, is like, is your wife, does she have hysteria? Try these bitters. And then the next article is like, will cure your wife's hysteria. Like, it appears to me in 1883, all the men believed that the women had hysteria and that iron bitters would remediate this hysteria. Okay. So I just thought that was so great. Like, wow. And then there's another piece in this. So they're assisted Irish immigrants. And this guy writes this whole article and he's like, all these Irish coming over. He's like, they're so terrible. They're poor potato eaters, these Irish. And I kind of like this because I got some Irish in me. And he's like, what are we going to do with all this 10,000 Irish people? They're lazy bums. And this is in the newspaper. This guy's just complaining about the Irish. Like, what's going on with that? That's messed up. Anyway, that's it. I just wanted to share that and on a funny note there.
Nothing ever changes.
Yeah, no.
Oh my God. Those lazy potato eating Irish. Well, I'm glad I got a chuckle out of y'all.
Yeah, that was fantastic, man. Thanks. I really appreciate it. The whole presentation is good, and I'm looking forward to next week as well. Is this still the same presentation that you had when you were here before, or have you been adding to it?
It's the only thing I've added
was the Lovelock stuff. Okay.
Of the Lovelock.
Can you like last week before we did his first show, he's like, I don't know if I've got enough, man. I took a bunch of stuff out.
I don't know if I got enough stuff, bro. Yeah, you're right.
So maybe in the future, your ability to to gauge how long your presentation is will improve.
Yeah.
I tried to tell you, I was like, dude, don't worry. Don't worry.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
I know. I probably underestimated the amount of time. I think I was imagining me doing this. Okay. And there was giant 12 feet. Next article. And then giant 10 feet. Next article. Catalina Islands. That,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe at the end we can do Matt's speed presentation. We'll get the micro machine announcement guy, and he'll run through it in 10 minutes.
Well, that was good. I'm looking forward to next week. And man, I appreciate you coming on. And again, I want to tell everybody, we do have the one-up boxes are piling up. We will get to these. We're going to do it at listener communications episode at some point, and we'll get to all the gifts you guys have been sending us. Some of them are sitting here. I see some Japanese snacks that we're not going to open until we do it on the show, but they're sitting right there. They're looking very tasty, and there is other stuff.
Maybe if I get real hungry.
Cal's working on music in the middle of the night. He might have himself a Japanese snack. And yes, we have tons of emails piling up, so we'll get to all that when we do. As Marty says, we'll get to that later when we do a communications episode. But we got
a big agenda going on.
Yeah, we got Matt. We've finished the Giants, and we have a whole bunch of other guests lined up. So we will get to it eventually, folks. So just if you've sent us something, we do have it, and we thank you, and we'll open it on the show when we do a listener communications. Anything else? No?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Well, yeah. So, thank you guys. We love you.
Giants. Always have.
Ham squares.
Always will.
Get back to work.
Good night, Adamu.
That's it. It worked.